Well, welcome to Who Came Up With That? It's the podcast that uncovers surprising stories behind everyday things. Today, we're tackling something that's probably running quietly beneath your feet or right behind your walls, and something you've inevitably had to replace your walls or floor because it's flooded. We're talking about plumbing. From ancient wells and clay pipes to massive sewer systems that shaped entire cities, plumbing has been essential to human civilization for thousands of years. Where did it all begin? Who came up with the idea to bring clean water in and waste out through a network of pipes? Plumbing. Who came up with that? Well, let's rewind way back, long before aqueducts, faucets, or even buckets as we know them. We're going to the Neolithic era. This is when humans first started digging the very first permanent water wells. These weren't just little holes in the ground, they were actual dugout access points where people could lower vessels, fill them with water, and carry them back home by hand. Well, we found some incredible archaeological examples. Wells on the island of Cyprus that date all the way back to around 8500 BCE, and others in the Jezreel Valley from around 6500 BCE. Back then, the size of a settlement wasn't determined by political borders or land ownership. It was determined by something much more basic. How much water could you get nearby? If your well ran dry, so did your community. Now, fast forward a few thousand years to around 3000 BCE in Orkney, up in the far north of Scotland. In the Neolithic villages of Skara Brae and the nearby Barnhouse settlement, people had started figuring out something astonishing: primitive indoor plumbing. They built a fresh and wastewater system using 2 stone channels, cleverly lined with tree bark. And inside some of these houses at Skara Brae, archaeologists found small cell-like enclosures. You put those clues together and it's pretty likely we're looking at one of the very first attempts at an indoor latrine. And it's not exactly your modern bathroom, but for 5,000 years ago, it's pretty groundbreaking. Well, if you think plumbing and sanitation are modern luxuries, think again. The story of moving, cleaning, and reusing water goes back thousands of years, across continents, cultures, and some of the most ingenious engineering the ancient world ever saw. Let's start with humanity's oldest tricks. One of them, reusing wastewater. This isn't a recent eco-friendly movement. It's an ancient survival skill tied directly to early sanitation. For centuries, untreated municipal wastewater, which is water from homes and public areas, it was redirected out of crowded settlements. The earliest method? Land application. Spreading wastewater over fields so it could both dispose of waste and nourish crops. Ancient civilizations like the Mesopotamians, the Indus Valley people, and the Minoans, they were already doing this in the Bronze Age, which was from roughly 3200 to 1100 BCE. Later, the Hellenic civilizations and the Romans, they used wastewater for irrigation, fertilization, and disposal, channeling it from cities like Athens and Rome to the surrounding farmland. Over in ancient Peru, the Nazca people, they developed something unique: puquillos, which is an interconnected system of wells and underground watercourses. In Mesoamerica, the Mayans, they became the third earliest civilization to develop indoor plumbing with pressurized water. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, clay sewer pipes appeared as early as 4000 BCE. We found them at the Temple of Bel in Nippur and in Eshnunna. These pipes didn't just remove wastewater, they also collected rainwater into wells. By 3200 BCE, the city of Uruk had brick-constructed latrines, and later, the Hittites and Hattusa, they used clay pipes with detachable, replaceable segments for easy cleaning. In ancient Persia, some of the earliest sanitation systems were built near the city of Zabul. The Persians perfected qanats, which were underground channels that carried water from higher elevations, and anbars, which were large cisterns for storing and cooling water. And in ancient Egypt, around 2400 BCE, the Pyramid of Sahur and its adjoining temple complex at Abusir, they had a network of copper drainage pipes. Proof that they weren't just moving water, they were experimenting with advanced materials to do it. Well, China, they also played a huge role in water history. The Neolithic Chinese discovered and made extensive use of deep-drilled groundwater for drinking. The Book of Changes, which is a Western Zhou dynasty text from around 1046 to 771 BCE, that even describes how to maintain wells and protect water sources. Archaeology shows that as far back as 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, the Chinese, they were digging deep wells. At the Himidu site, a Neolithic well built with 4 rows of logs and a square frame was discovered. And around 600 BCE, 60 tile line wells southwest of Beijing, they supplied both drinking water and irrigation. By the Qin and Han dynasties, plumbing that was already in use in East Asia. Well, back in South Asia, the Indus Valley civilization was set on the gold standard for ancient sanitation. In Lothal, between about 2350 and 1810 BCE, the ruler's house had its own private bath and latrine connected to an open street drain leading to the dock. Other homes had polished brick bathing platforms draining into covered brick sewers. They were held together with gypsum mortar that ran to soak pits outside the town walls. In the lower town, people used large buried urns called soak jars, drained through a hole in the bottom, that were regularly emptied and cleaned. The civilization's urban areas had public and private baths, underground drains, public sewer channels, and multiple reservoirs. A Mohenjo-Daro, multi-story building, sent wastewater from upper floors down through enclosed terracotta pipes or open chutes to street drains. Cities like Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Rakhigarhi, and Dholavira, they all show the earliest organized urban sanitation systems in the world, complete with rainwater harvesting, street ducts, and devices like shadoofs for lifting water. Step wells, which were deep stone-lined wells with staircases, they became an enduring feature of the Indian subcontinent. Over in the Mediterranean, the Minoan civilization on Crete, they built advanced underground clay pipes for water supply and sanitation. Their capital, Knossos, they had a fully organized water system, bringing in clean water, carrying out waste, and using storm sewage canals to prevent flooding. Flush toilets, they date back here to the 16th century BCE, possibly with an early first flush feature for pouring in water. These facilities connected to stone sewers regularly flushed by rainwater. The Minoans even developed elaborate heating systems. Elsewhere in Greece, Athens, and Asia Minor, they had indoor plumbing for pressurized showers. And in Alexandria, the inventor Heron, he designed pressurized piping for firefighting. One of Crete's most impressive feats was its inverted siphon system, paired with glass-covered clay pipes, still functional 3,000 years later. Then we get to Rome, a civilization that made water engineering an empire-wide statement. The Cloaca Maxima, a massive sewer system, emptied into the Tiber and had public latrines built above it. The Romans used norias, which are water wheels, to supply aqueducts and distribution systems across Europe and the Middle East. Their aqueducts and pipe networks brought water into homes, public wells, and fountains. Many Roman pipes were lead, but constant water flow and mineral buildup reduced the danger of lead poisoning. In Roman Britain, between 46 BCE and 410 CE, towns and garrisons had water supply and sewer networks. Pipes could be lead, wooden logs reinforced with iron rings, or hollowed wood sections joined together. Drains connected to massive sewer tunnels like the ones in York, and even frontier forts like the housesteads on Hadrian's Wall had latrines flushed with collected rainwater. From Bronze Age farmers to Roman engineers, from underground aquifers in China to step wells in India, the ancient world didn't just figure out how to use water, they mastered how to control it, reuse it, and make it serve entire civilizations. These early systems weren't just about survival. They were the literal blueprint for water and sanitation systems we still rely on today. And that's going to bring us to the medieval and early modern ages. Let's start in Nepal around the year 550 AD. In the city of Patan, which was already a thriving urban center, they constructed what was basically an early sewer system. We're talking brick-lined drains that carried wastewater away from homes and public spaces. The fact that these systems were built over 1,400 years ago in the middle of the Himalayas, it's kind of mind-blowing if you think about it. This wasn't just a ditch in the ground. It was an engineered network meant to keep the cities cleaner and healthier. A few centuries later in the Islamic world, hygiene wasn't just a matter of convenience. It was a religious and cultural expectation. Daily washing, bathing, and maintaining clean spaces were important parts of life, and cities were designed to make that possible. Public bathhouses, fountains, and water channels crisscrossed urban neighborhoods. In Baghdad, during the height of the Abbasid Caliphate in the 8th and 9th centuries, you could find a remarkably advanced sewer system. Wastewater was channeled through covered drains beneath the streets, and it connected to larger disposal points outside the city. This was a time when parts of Europe were still relying on throwing chamber pot contents into the street, so the contrast was pretty dramatic. And speaking of impressive ancient systems, let's head over to Central America. The classic Maya city of Palenque wasn't just famous for its temples and hieroglyphics. Well, they had underground aqueducts that carried fresh water right into the heart of the city. They even had flush toilets, which feels almost anachronistic for the time. And inside their homes, well, they used water filtration systems that worked almost exactly like modern ceramic filters. They carved porous limestone into cylinders, allowing water to pass through and be purified before drinking. It's a level of home water treatment you wouldn't see again in many places until millennia later. And meanwhile, over in Spain and across Spanish America, communities developed something called an acequia. This was a shared water course, often centuries old, that delivered flowing water for both drinking and irrigation. Paired with simple sand filtration systems, acequias could provide surprisingly clean, potable water to entire towns without complex machinery. Of course, getting clean water in is only half the battle. You've also got to figure out what to do with the dirty water once it's left the house. That's where an idea called sewage farms came in. These weren't farms that grew sewage, obviously, but instead large plots of land where wastewater was spread out for disposal and agricultural use. The concept was simple. Instead of dumping waste into rivers, you use it to irrigate crops, adding nutrients to the soil in the process. The first recorded sewage farm, they popped up in Bunslow, Silesia in 1531. Edinburgh, Scotland started one in 1650. Paris joined in by 1868, Berlin by 1876, and the United States was running them as early as 1871. Some of these are still going today. This wasn't just a European thing either, obviously. China, India, they both have long traditions of irrigating with wastewater. And in Australia, Melbourne, they launched a huge sewage farm in 1897. So from the Himalayan foothills to Baghdad's Golden Age, from Maya stone filters to Spanish acequias, and from Silesian sewage farms to Melbourne's sprawling wastewater fields, the story's the same. Humans have always found creative, surprisingly sophisticated ways to move water where it's needed, and waste where it's not. And finally, that's where we head to the modern era. Until the Enlightenment era, little progress was made in water supply and sanitation. But in the 18th century, as populations grew rapidly, London saw a boom in private water supply networks. The city's water infrastructure developed over centuries, evolving from early medieval conduits to major 19th century treatment works built in response to deadly cholera outbreaks, and eventually to modern large-scale reservoirs. A notable innovation was the first screw-down water tap that was patented in 1845 by Guest and Crimes. That was a brass foundry in Rotherham. Water purification also made strides during this time. The earliest documented use of sand filters dates back to 1804 when John Gibb, owner of a bleachery in Paisley, Scotland, he installed an experimental filter and sold surplus clean water to the public. The world's first treated public water supply was installed in 1829 by engineer James Simpson. That was for the Chelsea Waterworks Company in London. Water treatment quickly became mainstream with physician John Snow's 1854 investigation of the Broad Street cholera outbreak, proving that contaminated water supplies were key to spreading the disease. While water supply advanced, the collection and treatment of wastewater took critical steps with the construction of sewer networks. Cities such as Rome, Istanbul, and Fustat, they built sewer systems so well designed that some ancient sections remain in use today, integrated into modern sewer infrastructure. Instead of discharging waste directly into rivers or seas, modern pipes route sewage to treatment facilities. Before the invention of modern sewers, cesspools were the most common sanitation method. Ancient Mesopotamians used vertical shafts to carry waste into cesspools, and similar systems existed in the Indus Valley civilization, as well as ancient Crete and Greece. During the Middle Ages, waste was gathered in cesspools emptied by workers known as rakers, who often sold the collected waste as fertilizer. Archaeological findings reveal that some of the earliest sewer systems, which date back to the 3rd millennium BCE, they were developed in Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro in present-day Pakistan, like we said. Primitive sewers were carved alongside buildings, indicating early civilizations' understanding of waste disposal. But when the Industrial Revolution came around, and its rapid urbanization caused overcrowding and unsanitary conditions. That became a breeding ground for disease. As cities expanded in the 19th century, public health concerns grew. Municipal sanitation programs led to the construction of extensive gravity sewer systems. They were designed to control outbreaks of typhoid, cholera, and other waterborne diseases. Storm and sanitary sewers developed alongside expanding cities. And by the 1840s, indoor plumbing became a luxury that flushed waste away, reducing dependence on cesspools. In London, civil engineer Baldwin Latham, he pioneered sanitary engineering concepts, including the oval sewage pipe designed to improve drainage and prevent flooding. Cholera outbreaks in 1832, 1849, and 1855, along with the 1858 Great Stink. That's when the foul odor of untreated waste in the Thames River overwhelmed the city. It spurred the Metropolitan Commission of Sewers to appoint engineer Joseph Bazalgette. Well, his vast underground sewage system safely removed waste, diverting it downstream into natural waterways away from populated areas rather than into farmland as previously proposed. Even as late as the 19th century, parts of the UK struggled with inadequate sewerage, and diseases like cholera and typhoid were still common. Early attempts to protect the River Thames began in 1535, but only after the Great Stink did Parliament commit to constructing a modern sewer system. James Newlands, appointed Bureau Engineer of Liverpool in 1847, he led one of the earliest modern sewerage efforts. His detailed survey and design resulted in nearly 300 miles of sewers by the late 1860s, drastically improving public health and more than doubling life expectancy in the city. Wow. Bazalgette's London system, built between 1859 and 1865, that included nearly 100 miles of main intercepting sewers fed by thousands of miles of smaller pipes. The Thames embankment, integrating sewers, roads, public gardens, and the London Underground Circle Line, it became a hallmark of Victorian engineering. Sewage flowed by gravity to treatment works at Beckton and Crossness, with pumping stations aiding flow in low-lying areas. Bazalgette's system, with minor updates, remains the backbone of London's sewerage today. Elsewhere in Europe, cities like Paris, Hamburg, and Frankfurt, they developed their sewer systems in response to cholera outbreaks and urban growth. Paris built the Ourcq Canal in 1802 to supply water, but they struggled with wastewater pollution in the Seine. Between 1865 and 1920, under Eugene Belgrand, Paris expanded aqueducts and drainage laws, although sewage treatment remained rudimentary, relying on land spreading for purification. In Germany, Hamburg, they built its first comprehensive system in the mid-19th century. That was followed by Frankfurt, where typhoid deaths fell dramatically after sewage construction. Meanwhile, the United States saw its first sewer systems in Chicago and Brooklyn in the late 1850s, and its first chemical sewage treatment plant was built in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1890. Initially, sewers discharged untreated sewage into surface waters, but growing pollution concerns led cities to adopt chemical treatments and sedimentation. Public health improvements in the 19th century and early 20th centuries drastically reduced waterborne diseases and increased life expectancy. Early sewage treatment methods included sewage farming, applying wastewater to farmland as fertilizer, like we said. That was until James Smith, a cotton mill owner in the 1840s, pioneered piping sewage to farms, and that inspired public health advocates like Edwin Chadwick. Over the next decades, sewage farms spread, evolving from simple ditches to engineered tanks patented by William Higgs in 1846, and improved with mechanical dislodging by the early 1900s. At the century's end, primary sewage treatment, settling solids, and removing sludge, they addressed odor problems as well. Introducing oxygen into decomposing sewage initiated biological aerobic and anaerobic treatment methods that underpin modern wastewater processes. The septic tank, which is a sealed system allowing anaerobic liquefaction of waste, that was invented in France in the 1860s and improved in England in 1895. Septic tanks remain common, especially in rural areas. Biological sewage treatment advanced in the late 19th century as cities outgrew their farmland's capacity. Edward Franklin's 1870s experiments at a Croydon sewage farm demonstrated nitrification via filtration through gravel. This breakthrough led to contact beds, which are tanks filled with inert materials fostering microbial growth to decompose sewage. That was developed and implemented widely in the UK and the United States by the 1890s. The Royal Commission on Sewage Disposal's 1912 report, it set international standards limiting biochemical oxygen demand and suspended solids in sewage discharge. Soon after, in 1913, engineers Edward Arden and W.T. Lockett, they discovered the activated sludge process at Manchester's Davyhulme Sewage Works. By continuously aerating sewage, they achieved complete nitrification, revolutionizing wastewater treatment. Their 1914 paper launched the activated sludge process with the first full-scale system in Worcester, England, and that was in 1916. After World War I, the method spread across Europe and North America, and by the late 1930s, activated sludge was a standard biological sewage treatment method worldwide. And ever since then, this is what you see now. Modern plumbing, pipes coming in and out, flushing toilets, taking showers, clean water, disposing of dirty water, septic tanks, and all that made possible since the early existence of humans. Now, before we wrap up, here's a little teaser for one of our next episodes. We're going to dive into the invention of the toilet. Yeah, it's that humble throne we all rely on. From ancient innovations to the flush toilet that changed everything. We'll explore how this everyday fixture came to be and why it's one of the most important breakthroughs in plumbing history. But today, we took a fascinating journey through the world of plumbing, from the early water systems of ancient civilization like the Indus Valley, Crete, and Rome, to the groundbreaking sewer networks of Victorian London and beyond. We saw how plumbing evolved from simple wells and clay pipes to massive underground networks that transformed entire cities. Along the way, we discovered how these systems not only brought in clean water, but also carried waste away, helping shape the health and growth of civilizations. So next time you turn on a tap or flush a toilet, remember, you're benefiting from thousands of years of human innovation and engineering. That's going to do it for this episode of Who Came Up With That? If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with friends who love a good story about everyday inventions. Till next time, keep wondering about the world around you, and we'll see you next week.